Picture buying meat in the middle of a blazing summer. No refrigerators, no freezers, not even a bit of ice. Just raw cuts of flesh, hanging out in crowded medieval markets, surrounded by buzzing flies. That was everyday life for people back then. So how did anyone make sure that meat was safe enough to eat? Fresh meat had a very short temper in those times. Within only a day or two without cooling, it could shift from dinner to danger. The moment an animal was butchered, the race against time began, and more often than not, decay won. Markets during the warmer months were a risky place to shop. Flies swarmed around meat stalls like tiny demons, spreading germs from one slab to another. The stench could make your eyes water, yet that was only a warning of worse things. Bacteria spread at lightning speed, turning good food into deadly poison. Every purchase was a gamble. One unlucky bite could make the whole family sick, sometimes fatally sick. Food poisoning was no small matter in the medieval world. A bad meal could end a life. Butchers carried a huge burden. Selling spoiled meat meant ruin. Town officials enforced strict rules, and punishments were severe. A single mistake could destroy a butcher's livelihood and reputation overnight. Communities depended on honest meat sellers, and trust was everything. Still, people in the past were far from helpless. They refused to let nature win so easily. Across towns and villages, people came up with clever methods to keep meat edible for longer. With only basic tools and local knowledge, they created preservation systems that were surprisingly advanced. Food planning worked on a completely different rhythm than ours today. Meals were not about daily choices, but long-term survival. Proper storage was as important as harvesting the food itself. Those who mastered preservation could get through harsh winters. Those who failed went hungry. Yet what makes this story amazing is that their struggle led to flavors that are still beloved today. Bacon, ham, jerky, and sausages all began as smart ways to fight spoilage. What started as survival techniques became culinary traditions. Entire trades formed around this skill. Salt dealers, smokehouse workers, and curing experts were vital in every town. Their work separated times of plenty from times of starvation. What they created was more than food preservation. It was a form of artistry. They did not just stop meat from rotting. They discovered how to transform it into something richer and tastier. And it all came down to timing. Medieval people learned that the easiest way to deal with spoilage was to avoid it from the start. That is why most animals were slaughtered in late autumn. The timing was perfect. Cold weather slowed bacteria almost to a halt. As winter arrived, the air itself became a natural refrigerator. Meat could hang for days or even weeks without spoiling. There was another practical reason, too. Keeping animals alive through winter cost resources that few families could spare. Feeding livestock meant using up hay and grain needed for people. Many animals would not even survive the cold months. It was wiser to slaughter them while they were healthy and fat from summer grazing. During the cold season, people stored meat in sheds, cellars, or under-roofed outdoor areas. The chill in the air did all the work, preserving food without effort. Nature became the perfect storage partner. What began as a necessity turned into a social event. Autumn butchering was not lonely work. It was a community celebration. Neighbors gathered to help one another, sharing labor, tools, and knowledge. Processing a large animal was too much for one family alone, so everyone joined in. These gatherings became yearly highlights. After months of eating mostly grains and vegetables, the arrival of fresh meat was a reason to feast. Children learned family secrets about curing and salting, while adults exchanged stories and recipes. It was practical and joyful at the same time. The shared effort filled both the pantry and the heart. Each person played a role, from cutting meat to preparing storage spaces. Knowing how to slice, when to dry, and how to spot spoiled meat was wisdom passed down for generations. By combining knowledge, teamwork, and perfect timing, Medieval people found a way to turn one of life's biggest dangers into a triumph of human ingenuity. Your cow gets slaughtered this week, mine the next. We trade the cuts that will not keep, so both families enjoy some variety instead of eating only beef for months. The entire system worked perfectly because it fit human needs with the rhythm of nature. No struggle against summer heat or winter chill, just cooperation with the seasons. But timing the slaughter right was only step one. Even in cold months, meat would not last forever without some extra help. After all that careful planning, people still faced the same old enemy rot. That is where salt became the savior of medieval kitchens. Salt was nothing short of magic when it came to preservation. It drew moisture out of the meat, leaving bacteria with no place to thrive. Without water, decay simply stopped. It was simple chemistry with life-saving results. Yet salt back then was far from ordinary. It was not the cheap seasoning we sprinkle today. It was rare, costly, and often guarded like treasure. People called it white gold for a reason. Entire wars erupted over salt sources, and powerful trade routes existed just to transport it. Some workers even received their wages in salt, which gave birth to the phrase, "worth his salt." Every community had craftsmen who mastered the art of curing with salt. These experts knew that precision was everything. The right amount could preserve food for months, but one mistake could ruin the whole batch. Two major techniques dominated the trade. The first was dry salting. Butchers covered every surface of the meat in thick crystals of salt and left it to rest for days or weeks. Moisture slowly drained out, leaving the flesh tough but safe to eat. The second was wet salting, which used a strong brine solution. Meat soaked in these salty baths absorbed protection from within, becoming nearly indestructible to spoilage. When done correctly, salted beef, pork, or fish could last through entire seasons. The flavor was far from delicate. It was chewy and extremely salty, but it was food that survived when nothing else did. Families soaked salted meat before cooking to remove excess salt, then boiled or roasted it into meals that filled empty stomachs during the hardest times. Salted meat shaped medieval culture in ways few realize. It was the backbone of winter diets, the lifeline of long voyages, and the foundation of armies on the move. Sailors lived on salted pork and fish. Soldiers marched with barrels of salted beef. Monks stored piles of salted cod for fasting days when fresh meat was forbidden. The craft itself demanded skill. Too little salt meant disaster. Too much turned food into stone. Temperature, air moisture, and time all played a role. Experienced salt curers guarded their secrets closely, teaching their children exact methods like valuable family heirlooms. But no one relied on salt alone. Wise communities used several preservation methods at once to make sure their food stores would last. That is where drying came in a process both practical and strangely beautiful to watch. Butchers sliced their meat into long, narrow pieces and hung them in rows like cloth drying after a wash. Airflow was key. You could not simply hang meat anywhere. The best drying spots caught steady wind, avoided rain, and received just enough sunlight to draw out moisture without cooking the meat. In busy towns, people built huge drying frames that filled market squares. They looked like wooden skeletons standing tall in the open air, designed to catch every passing breeze. Travelers described entire towns draped with strings of meat that shimmered in the sun like cobwebs. Drying took time and patience. Beef strips could take 2 full weeks to reach the right texture. Fish required even longer. Cod often hung for months until it became as hard as boards, earning the name stockfish. The process was risky. One bad storm or humid spell could ruin everything. To reduce that risk, many butchers built indoor drying rooms. These had slotted walls for airflow and small windows angled to catch sunlight. Near the coast, fishmongers discovered that sea air worked wonders. Ocean winds dried fish faster, while salty mist from the waves added a natural preservative effect. Coastal towns turned this advantage into a thriving trade. Drying was not just about keeping meat edible. It also changed the flavor dramatically. Dried meat developed deep, complex, and sometimes tangy notes that fresh cuts never had. Many people grew to prefer it, especially in winter when fresh food was scarce. In some regions, dried meat even became a form of money. Travelers carried jerky the way we carry cash. It was light, nourishing, and universally useful. You could trade a few strips for a bed, a meal, or a favor. The quality of dried meat determined its value, and skilled producers earned serious respect. Through salt and air, medieval people turned fragile meat into lasting nourishment. It was science, patience, and artistry combined, an achievement that helped entire societies survive when the world was still ruled by nature's unpredictable moods. Skilled meat dryers could tell by touch or smell exactly when a strip was ready. Too short a drying time meant the meat would rot in days. Too long and it turned into something closer to tough leather than dinner. Through generations of trial and error, medieval people perfected this balance. They created dried meats that could survive months at sea or on grueling military campaigns. But drying had one weakness that drove butchers to search for something better. A method that not only solved the moisture issue, but also made food taste incredible. Ever walked by a grill and felt instantly hungry from that smoky aroma? Medieval butchers knew that secret long before modern barbecues. For them, it was not about flavor alone. It was about staying alive. Building a smokehouse was simple enough. 4 sturdy walls, a roof, and plenty of hooks to hang meat from wooden beams above the fire. The real challenge was keeping the temperature perfect. Too much heat and the meat burned. Too little and bacteria took over. Woods like oak, hickory, and apple became the favorites for this job. Each type gave the meat a unique character. Oak brought deep, earthy tones. Hickory added strength and spice. Applewood gave a soft sweetness that paired beautifully with lighter meats. Smoke did more than season the food, it protected it. The compounds carried in the smoke acted like invisible shields, killing bacteria and coating the surface with a thin, protective layer. Butchers did not know the chemistry behind it, but they knew the results were extraordinary. Smoking was a long, patient process. Hams hung in these huts for weeks, sometimes months. Bacon strips dangled in thick rows, slowly changing from pale pink to rich golden brown. Sausages twisted into loops, gathering that crisp, smoky skin that snapped when bitten. Smokehouses had another hidden advantage. They kept flies and insects away. Flies could not stand the smell or the heat, so while open market meat attracted swarms, smoked meat stayed clean and safe. Butchers timed their smoking sessions during the worst insect months, creating a natural defense that required no effort once started. That scent of wood and fat became part of daily town life. Markets often smelled like one giant barbecue. Shoppers followed the smoky trail straight to the butcher's quarter, certain that the food there was safer than anything else. It was the medieval version of a guarantee. Smoke even covered up another unpleasant reality. Sometimes butchers noticed their meat beginning to spoil before it sold. Smoking could hide that early sour smell, buying them precious time. Not the most honest trick, but certainly practical. The endurance of smoked meat was legendary. Properly done, it could last for weeks or even months on long journeys without any cooling at all. Traders, travelers, and soldiers all relied on it. But while smokehouses worked wonders, medieval cooks soon found another way to protect meat that used simple liquids found in every kitchen. That discovery was acid preservation. Drop cooked meat into a strong acidic liquid, and bacteria had no chance. Vinegar became a household hero. By pouring boiling vinegar over meat and sealing it tightly, families could make food that lasted through the winter. But vinegar was only the beginning. Wine worked just as well, and merchants began using barrels filled with cheap wine to store cooked meats. The acidity and alcohol combined to prevent spoilage while adding rich flavor. Wealthier households took it a step further, using fine wines and turning preservation into a symbol of status. Brine solutions followed, acting as a liquid version of dry salting. Meat soaked in salty water could remain fresh for months, but the balance had to be exact. Too little salt and decay won. Too much, and the meat became too salty to eat. Then there was oil preservation, a completely different idea. By submerging meat fully in oil, people blocked out all oxygen, leaving bacteria unable to grow. Olive oil was considered the best choice, though other animal fats worked as well. Some cooks infused herbs into the oil, creating deliciously seasoned meat that aged like fine cheese. Honey was another miracle ingredient. Naturally antibacterial and airtight, it sealed meat away from germs and kept it sweet and safe. Ancient Egyptians had proven honey could preserve food for decades, and medieval Europeans eagerly adopted the method. It even helped balance the strong taste of older meat. The most effective approach, though, came from combining methods. Cooks would lightly salt the meat first, soak it in vinegar or wine, and then top the jar with a thick layer of oil or honey. Each barrier added another layer of defense, ensuring that even if one failed, the rest kept working. Pickled and preserved meats became the trusted food of travelers. Merchants heading across rough terrain carried barrels of vinegar-soaked beef and pork, confident that their meals would still be good weeks or months later. Through smoke, salt, acid, and oil, medieval people turned the fragile art of meat preservation into a masterpiece of survival and taste. Ship captains understood that pickled meat could withstand sea air and tropical heat without spoiling. These preserved supplies quite literally powered the trade routes that connected the medieval world. Yet even with all these clever liquid methods keeping food safe, people still craved variety. That desire led to one of the most ingenious food preservation inventions ever made. Instead of drying or soaking, they decided to grind. They took leftover bits of meat, salted them, seasoned them with strong spices, and stuffed the whole mixture into animal casings. From that messy experiment, sausages were born. It may not sound elegant, but it was brilliantly practical. By chopping meat into tiny pieces, medieval butchers gave salt far more surface area to do its job. Every shred got coated with the mineral that stopped bacteria in their tracks. Then came the real discovery. Packing that mixture into cleaned intestines or stomach linings created a tight seal that kept out air entirely. No oxygen meant no rot. Simple and effective, the real magic came from the spices. Garlic, black pepper, and fennel were not chosen just for taste. They helped disguise meat that was not exactly fresh. Families could not afford to waste food, so transforming questionable cuts into spiced sausages became a survival tactic. And surprisingly, these links lasted for weeks. They hung from kitchen ceilings, market stalls, or cellar beams, drying slowly while staying safe to eat. Salt, spices, and natural casings formed a defense stronger than most modern preservatives. What started as a survival trick quickly evolved into a regional art form. Different parts of Europe developed their own distinctive sausage styles. In German towns, heavy garlic ruled. In Italian villages, fennel and wine added warmth. Across France, herbs from local fields gave each sausage its own scent and flavor. These weren't random recipes scribbled down in books. They were family legacies. Generations of butchers guarded their exact spice blends like family treasure. Some of those same recipes are still in use today. That is not nostalgia, but proof of how well they worked. Modern favorites such as salami, chorizo, and bratwurst can all trace their ancestry back to those medieval craftsmen who fought spoilage without refrigeration. But sausage making was only one piece of the preservation puzzle. Entire communities relied on strict systems to ensure meat stayed safe. Town leaders enforced detailed rules to prevent public health disasters. A single bad batch could sicken half the neighborhood. Medieval cities treated food safety as serious business. Inspectors roamed the markets checking every slab of meat. They pressed, sniffed, and looked for signs of rot before allowing it to be sold. Many towns restricted butchering to early morning hours when the air was coolest, reducing the risk of decay. Each region also developed unique local solutions based on their climate. Coastal villages used sea salt and breezes to preserve fish. Mountain communities stored meat in cool caves. In desserts, people relied on rapid drying methods under intense sunlight. None of these secrets were written down. They were whispered from parent to child, preserved by memory instead of parchment. Some towns created their own food laws with surprising creativity. In Germany, summer meat sales were banned after noon to prevent spoilage. Italian markets required marble tables to keep meat cold longer. In France, villages organized specific slaughter days, turning preservation into a communal event where everyone worked together to cure, salt, and store meat. Those who broke the rules faced harsh punishments. Public humiliation was common. Dishonest butchers could be tied in the square and pelted with rotten produce. Some even had to eat their spoiled goods in front of spectators. Meanwhile, the best preservers earned fame and fortune. Their cured meats were legendary, drawing customers from distant towns. These masters understood exactly how to balance air, temperature, humidity, and time to keep food edible for months. Their experiments shaped the foundation of European cuisine. Many modern delicacies owe their existence to these resourceful medieval innovators. Italian prosciutto, Spanish chorizo, French pâté, and German bratwurst all began as ways to keep meat from rotting. In their struggle against decay, those butchers accidentally created foods the world still treasures centuries later.